Welcome to Ignite. Really excited to have you here. We're going to get started in about 10 minutes, but it would be great if everybody could find a seat so the servers can get your orders and get you drinks and snacks and get the aisles clear for them. And we'll get started soon. Thank you.
Just so you know, we did a limited run of T-shirts, and Zania will be over there in case you would like one. And our sponsor, Taika Coffee, also has free coffee that you can grab. So we'll get started with our icebreaker in just 5 minutes. Welcome to the first Ignite post-pandemic Jubilee. I'm Brady Forrest. I'm one of your hosts. The other host is a surprise, and we'll bring her up here later. Oh no, sorry, Trey, can you back it up? We're just gonna, cool. So we are about to do just the most ridiculous, silly thing that we could possibly do in this tightly packed room, which is we are gonna have a rock, paper, scissors battle. Now, is anybody familiar with this? All right. Well, then you're probably one step ahead, yet you still have zero chance of winning. So the way it works is everybody square off with someone next to you, kind of pair up, kind of look at each other. Okay, now that you've done that, what we'll do is in about 5 seconds after I'm done explaining, you will do rock, paper, scissors. And then whoever wins will find another winner, and whoever lost is that person's biggest fan. And so we'll have 2 people become one team, and then 4 people become one team, 8, so on, until we have 2 teams of about 150 doing battle, ready to tear each other's eyes out. And we'll have the final battle up here, and the winner does get a prize. All right, so pair off. Yep. It's 1, 2, 3, go. It's 1, 2, 3, go. All right. Okay, these are all single round. Find your next team. All right, I want to hear names, chanting. All right, Ed, come on, Ed, find your next person. Go Elf, go Elf. Oh yeah. What are you doing? What are you doing? Brooke, Sarah, do battle. Okta, do some battle. All right, all right. I want to hear some chanting. Woo! All right. We've got a winner over here. Right over there, right over there. All right. I think we're going to have to bridge the sides. All right, wait a minute. How many winners do we have right now? Do we have 2 teams? Are there any other champ? Wait a minute. There's some other undefeated people. All right. Pair off. Trey or Scout. All right. And Care, there's another person back there. Care. There's a winner right behind you. I think there's 3. I want to hear some cheering. Come on. Come on. Go for your champion. All right. Are there any other? Are you undefeated? All right, are you the last? Wait 1 second before you guys start. Are you the last? Okay. All right, so you two face off and then. All right. Are there any others? All right, I'll get up here. Okay, you two face off. Oh. All right, come on up. Yeah. Go around. Okay, is everybody ready to cheer? Who's cheering for L? Okay, who's cheering for Drew? Okay, I want to hear an L. I want to hear it, Drew. Okay. Best of 3. Oh, best of 3. Early lead by Miss Black. Oh, and it's a sweep. All right, and now we are going to begin. And with all that in mind, that is how the rest of the night will go. Our goal here is edutainment. All right, Trey, we'll get started now. Hey, everybody, I'm Brady Forrest. In case you don't know what you just walked into, this is an Ignite. Ignite is a global talk series I started in 2006, and if you'd asked me then if I'd still be doing it, I would have said no fucking way. Oh, sorry, I shouldn't have said that. The main thing about Ignite is that every speaker gets just 20 slides, 15 seconds a slide for a total of 5 minutes on stage. And the idea is for them to just share their idea in a way that's fun for all of you. It's a chance for everyone to be a rock star. And one thing that surprised the heck out of me is that Ignite is global. It's around the world, all 6 continents. At its peak, it was around 300 chapters. And we aim to get that and beyond very soon. Our goal is basically to teach people how to have communication, to reach out to an audience, whoever that audience is. And we're about to invest a lot more time into Ignite, because as I mentioned, there's a surprise host. Please, everyone, meet Fyron.
Hi, everybody. Not so surprising, but yeah. Wait. I just want to say that somebody was asking what L won. L, where are you? Over here. So, L, you have to stay to the end of the show because we're going to bring you back on stage. That's what you won. You'll find out later. So, I want to tell you a little bit about Ignite Marquee because it's a different kind of Ignite show, and we decided earlier this year that I would come on full-time at Ignite because we see so much potential for Ignite Talks. It's been around for 16 years, it's grown all over the world, and we want to know what's going to happen with Ignite if we put some sustained energy into it. So one of the first things we kind of dreamed up as we were brainstorming was Ignite Marquee. And the way that I like to talk about Ignite Marquee is that it's the next stage for Ignite speakers. So I know a lot of you have been to an Ignite Talks event. So we have an Ignite Talks San Francisco. We actually had one a couple of weeks ago. And that's a community-based event. And we have a lot of those all over the world. They're community chapters. and they're always based in a specific geography, and they pull people from that area and they get them on stage. And one of the things that's really remarkable about Ignite Talks is that it's accessible. You don't have to have a lot of speaking experience to get on an Ignite Talks stage. Ignite Marquee, as I said, is the next stage for Ignite Talks. It gives our speakers who have spoken at a community event or have really worked on their skills a next place to go. And it's different than other Ignite Talks chapters because it travels. So we're doing the very first one tonight here in our hometown of San Francisco. Yeah! And then we have a handful of places that we're looking at for next year. This is not written in stone, but we are looking at New York City and Mexico City and a couple of other places. So we're going to be traveling around next year. And what Ignite Marquee does is it takes those speakers that have done Ignite Talks, they've really worked on their talks, they have been on stage and really worked on their public speaking skills, and it pulls from the regions that we visit. So when we go to New York City, we're going to pull from that area. And so no Ignite Marquee event is ever going to be the same as any other. So the speakers that we're going to see tonight, some of them are actually professional speakers. A lot of them have done Ignite Talks before. All of them have spent a good amount of time on stage, and they have worked really hard to put these talks together for you. And we have funny talks, and we have serious talks, and the whole gamut. And we're also going to have a quick intermission in the middle of the show just to kind of give you a rundown on what's going to happen. And yeah, we'll end probably around 10 o'clock.
All right. And now our first speaker is gonna talk about her greatest fear. And when she's not thinking about defensive positions, she is a mom, a wife, and a nurse practitioner. Please welcome out my downstairs neighbor, Elizabeth Kiko.
Hello! All right. First of all, I'm so excited to be here with this impressive lineup of people, and I'm very excited to go first, so bear with me. You're gonna hear a lot of really fun and exciting talks tonight, but I would like to start us off actually in a really serious space. So I'm gonna tell you a bit about myself. I was born in the UK, and my family moved us to California when I was a little kid, and we didn't bring a lot of things with us, but one thing we did bring was this incredible book called How to Survive. It wasn't this book, but it was something just like this. The book was full of all these amazing stories of crazy disasters, like planes falling out of the sky and buildings burning, and amazing tips for how you could survive these scenarios. But one thing that always stood out to me, even as a 7-year-old kid, was how absolutely devastating it would be if you ever had to go face to face with an ostrich. The book made it really clear that you were not going to survive this outcome. Sure, you could jump out of a burning building, but if you had to face an ostrich, you were a goner. I know what you're thinking. How could this dopey little bird, who is famous for burying its head in the sand, which is a myth, by the way, that lives in Africa, possibly be a threat to me? Well, it turns out, my friends, as of 2021, about a third of the world's ostrich population lives right here in the United States. That's about 50,000 ostriches across 3,500 industrial and private farms. So they are right here in our backyard. Something you might not know, one of the most famous ostrich attacks that has happened to the very one and only Johnny Cash on his farm in Tennessee. His pet ostrich Waldo nearly eviscerated him one day, and he actually credits his survival for a giant belt buckle he happened to be wearing that day, otherwise he would have been a goner. So how does the ostrich stack up to other animals on the food chain? Well, they're certainly not the worst, but when you compare them to other known killers like sharks and bears and alligators, they are more deadly, killing 7 to 10 humans per year. So what makes these creatures so formidable? Well, the average adult ostrich is between 7 and 9 feet tall and weighs between 220 and 320 pounds. They are large creatures, the largest bird on the planet. They are also incredibly fast. They're the fastest bipedal land animal on the planet, with top speeds of 40 to 45 miles an hour. To put that in perspective, cheetahs can run about 70. Lions can do top speeds of 50. You and I could probably run 6 to 8 miles an hour if we're really fit. You've heard of angry birds. This is an angry bird. It is a territorial, aggressive bird, and it happens to hate people. So if you come face to face with this bird, it is coming after you, and it does not like to give up once it's marked you as its enemy. So here's the scenario. You're walking down the street one day, minding your own business, and you piss off an ostrich. So let me talk you through some options that might save your life one day. The first thing I want you to remember is to just be calm. It's just a 300-pound, 9-foot-tall turkeyzilla with razor-sharp talons that wants to eviscerate you. You're going to be totally fine. So you have a few options. Option one, your body is going to tell you to run, but your brain is going to remember the math. You cannot outrun this creature. Plus, if you turn your back on an ostrich, it will likely give you a kick so strong it has been known to kill a lion. If you get that kick, you're a goner. Don't run. Option two, embrace your inner cowardice. Run, hide under a rock, a box, climb up a very tall tree. Do anything you can to evade the eyesight of this creature. But you should be aware that it will stalk you for a long time. It does not like to give up. Option three, if you happen to be around a nice cozy thorn bush, dive on in. Take the cuts and scrapes. The chances that the ostrich comes in after you are rare because they want to protect those giant eyeballs on top of their head. So actually a thorn bush might be a pretty safe bet. Option four, play dead. Better yet, play ostrich. Bury your head in the sand. Hands behind your neck, face down, protect those important organs. Be prepared to be stood on or sat on while the ostrich tries to peck you to death from behind. Finally, if there's nowhere to run or hide, you're going to be defensive. You're going to try to hit the ostrich in its neck, its legs, or its wings. Consider trying to poke it in the eyes, or even take your shirt off and throw it over the ostrich's head to confuse it for a while you try to escape. So if you ever find yourself in the situation where you have upset an ostrich, I hope that these tips help you survive. But according to this book from my childhood, you probably have better odds jumping out of a burning plane or figuring out how to survive a sinking ship than you do surviving an ostrich attack. That's it.
Thank you, Elizabeth. I hope I never have to use that information. So, how many of you keep a dream journal? Cool, we got a couple. How many of you, like me, don't ever remember your dreams? Okay. So, our next speaker has been posting a dream online every day for the last 13 years. She is a dream explorer, and she's going to take us to a very special place between being awake and being asleep. Please welcome Jennifer Dumpert.
There is a whirling psychedelic space at the edge of your mind where you can go anytime for creativity, problem solving, mental, emotional healing, and consciousness exploration. I'm talking about the remarkable space of the liminal dream. When you're waking up, it's hypnagogia. When you're falling asleep, it's hypnopomnia. We don't have time for hypnopomnia today, but in 5 minutes, I'm going to explain to you what hypnagogia is and how you can use this space between waking and sleep for creativity and problem solving. We all know the experience. You're falling asleep, you're struggling to stay awake, you have that kaleidoscopic swirl of images, associations, memories. Maybe it's aural, you tune into a radio station that's aliens or hear crowds running outside. We all know this experience. You're awake and you're asleep at the same time. You're in dream space, but you can hear the clock strike 6. You can track the conversation that's happening in the room. We all know this. We tend to think about waking and sleep as binary, right? As 1, 0, on, off, white, black. But in fact, there's a continuity of consciousness, a spectrum, and you can fall anywhere along the spectrum of 1 part dreaming and 1 part awake. In fact, it's one of the 7 or 8 EEG states that we all go through every 24 hours. We all know about EEG, right? It's electricity. Your mind is, that you're measuring the electricity in the brain. EEG states tend to be marked by like a particular sine wave. You've all seen it. Right now, you're all probably in beta. I never know what I'm doing with slides here. Right now, you're probably all in beta, right, which is something like 13 waves per second, right? So we really reliably go through a certain set of EEG structures every 24 hours. The thing about hypnagogia, which is, by the way, by far the shortest period of EEG that we go through, right? It's like 5 or 10 minutes without training. It's also by far the most chaotic. So while most EEG states have 1 or 2 different sine waves, hypnagogia has 6. Every other EEG state that is present in the 24-hour period is in this little 5 or 10 minute period of hypnagogia. One of the reasons that it is such a fecund space for creativity and problem solving is because your mind is still going, your mind never stops. But in hypnagogia, you're going through different patterns. You're approaching things in different ways. So problems that you've been thinking about, you can think about differently. You're also in the space of the dream. You're encountering the numinous. You're encountering the visionary in the dream space that we all have. And yet you have enough waking consciousness to bring this back into the waking world. People have been using hypnagogia for problem solving, creativity, and all manner of other reasons. So Jung had a hypnagogic practice that he called active imagination. And he thought active imagination was actually the best tool for approaching emotional and mental healing. I don't have time to get into that exercise now. You're going to have to buy my book to get that. But I am going to teach you today what I call the Dali-Edison method. So some of the things that have happened in hypnagogia, the periodic table was conceived in a hypnagogic dream, the benzene ring was conceived in a hypnagogic dream. People have been using this. Thomas Edison and Salvador Dali, independently of each other, came up with the same practice for harnessing hypnagogia. And here's what they would do. So they would take things in their hands. Edison held 2 balls. Salvador Dali kept a big brass Spanish key. And they would put metal plates on the ground underneath an easy chair. And when they were feeling really sleepy, they would lie back into the easy chair and go into hypnagogia. And as soon as they were past it, as soon as they started to fall asleep, they would naturally let go of what they were holding. They would fall and hit the metal plates, and then they would jolt up awake. And Edison would write down all the ideas that he came up with, and Dali would begin to sketch. This is one of the ways that I come up with a lot of the ideas that I have for writing, for talking. So you yourself can do this. Handful of change, jingly dog toy, try the Dali-Edison method anytime. You want to solve your code, you want to solve your life, creativity, problem solving, it's there for you.
Thank you, Jennifer. So our next speaker is an awe-inspiring human who has done more than 3,000 injury-free parachute jumps over the last 15 years. He's an entrepreneur and an executive coach, and he's very interested in where self-reflection, motivation, and survival meet. Please welcome Brett Kistler.
17 years ago, I made my first base jump. And what I expected to experience on that day was intensity, adrenaline. And I got that, but what I also experienced was presence and calm. When I found myself in free fall, my thinking mind stepped aside, my identity stepped aside, and I found myself experiencing the world directly with my senses. And this isn't something that I had been used to experiencing. I was used to thinking my reality with my mind. And so I was hooked. For 15 years, I went down the rabbit hole, and I collected some amazing experiences around the world, and I continued to follow that thread of presence that I found while jumping. And people would ask me, are you some kind of adrenaline junkie with a death wish? And I'd respond, no, I'm a presence junkie with a life wish. I just wanted to experience everything, and I wanted to experience it fully and be there for it. And I didn't just want to be there for it in the sky while I was flying. I wanted to be there for it while I was on the ground in my everyday life. So I'm going to tell you about 3 key perspective shifts that occurred for me that helped me bring that presence from the sky into my life on the ground. The first one, of course, being fear. My relationship to fear started as that I thought it was something that I could conquer. I thought that if I could overcome my fear, if I could overcome it, then I could do anything. I'd be unstoppable. But in reality, I'd actually been controlled by fear and anxiety for my entire life. I hadn't been letting myself feel it. I wasn't even aware that it was there. Turns out that jumping gave me a chance to experience fear on my own terms. And so, over the course of my career, I started to recognize that the more I allow myself to feel my fear, the more it orients my attention to what's important, and it grounds me into reality. And whether I'm doing a new kind of jump that is scary, or whether I'm speaking on a stage, or whether I'm starting a new company, the more that I welcome my fear as a trusted advisor and a friend, I don't need to control it. I don't need to manage it. And the more present I can be. So the next perspective shift was around freedom. Now, I came out of the gate craving freedom. I wanted to be free from all the rules and expectations of society, of religion, of authority. And so I started to jump the tracks of every form of limit that I could find and see around me until I eventually came up against a set of very hard limits: the laws of physics, gravity, aerodynamics. Finally, a set of rules that I could trust. So I found, while dancing within these limits, that freedom is actually an internal thing, because it doesn't matter what the external limits are. What it matters is how I relate to and how I engage with those limits. So for example, while I'm making a jump, I have to operate within a very thin margin for error. And outside of that margin, the consequences are immediate and swift and savage. And so, meanwhile, what I actually find is I find a deep freedom in these moments because I'm actually taking full responsibility for my experience. So finally, identity. And this one took me a long time to come around to. I used to think that identity was something that I would be building up. I would find out who I'm going to become, and then I would eventually step into that identity and become it. So I started to cover myself with the logos of sponsors, and I started to organize my life to be invited to new events and maximize my reputation and opportunities. Meanwhile, I was actually creating a whole new set of expectations for myself. And those expectations can be a liability. And after I started to see how many accidents were happening around me in the sport, ultimately many of them driven by identity-related decisions, I started to see how tragic identity can be when unexamined. So I took a step back and I started to explore the web of beliefs that underpin my identity. And I started to feel the unfelt emotions that were holding those beliefs in place. And so instead of building up my identity, I started to allow my identity to unravel. And I found that the less attached I became to who I thought I was and who I thought I was supposed to be, the more present I could be with reality as it actually is in any given moment. And so this is how I finally found a way to bring the presence that I found while flying into my life on the ground. By holding my identity lightly, I can find the clarity to find the freedom in any constraints. And with an identity that doesn't need defending, and a freedom that requires nothing, fear becomes excitement, and it becomes the thing that gives me guidance to my next steps in life. Thank you.
Well, that's what I'm doing next weekend. Thank you very much, Brett. I was pretty blown away when I saw him talk about that at Burning Man, and the idea of presence and meditation all coming together with base jumping is pretty powerful. Now, our next speaker studies the mind. She is a Harvard-trained physician, a neuroscientist, a futurist, and she was a finalist for astronaut selection. please welcome out Dr. Divya Chander.
We're exposed to radiation from the sun, radiation from galactic cosmic radiation, and microgravity. So how can we mitigate the risks? One is by studying astronauts who've already been up. This is Commander Mark Kelly on the left and Scott Kelly on the right. Now what happened was Scott Kelly went on board the station for almost 1 year while his brother stayed on Earth. And we looked at the differences. And believe me, there were a lot of differences. There were differences in everything from his telomere length to his microbiome, his immune system, his cardiovascular system, his vision. But the one persistent change that never went back, that's 7% of his gene expression.
Can we just start over? You were talking so loud, I couldn't tell if you had your mic working or not. No. Yeah. All right.
I will start over. I was starting by saying humankind has always dreamed of space exploration. I have always dreamed of it. And space is a really inhospitable place, and we are limited by the physics of rocket propulsion. So what we are dealing with are things like radiation coming from the sun and galactic cosmic radiation. We're also limited by things like microgravity, which wreaks havoc with our bodies. So what could we do to mitigate the risk? We can look to see what other astronauts have done and how they changed. Now, Commander Mark Kelly is here on the left, and that is his genetic identical twin, Commander Scott Kelly. Mark Kelly stayed on Earth while his brother was up on station for almost 1 year. And then we looked at the changes, and there were a lot. Scott Kelly's microbiome changed, his telomere length changed, his cardiovascular and immune system changed, his DNA was mutated, and his gene expression changed. And of all those changes, 7% of that gene expression change didn't go back to normal. So how can we mitigate the risk? We can study organisms on this planet that deal with hostile environments. We've thrown this tardigrade up into space, and it survived the hard vacuum of space. And then we could take those lessons learned and do things like use CRISPR to edit an astronaut's genome. We might be able to edit an astronaut's genome to repair its DNA in response to the radiation it's exposed to. Another possibility is to take CRISPR and these other enzymatic systems and use them to differentially turn gene expression on and off. After all, the main persistent change for Scott Kelly was in his epigenome, these like space genes that changed. Now we can also use things like CRISPR to engineer plants. What could we do with that? Well, we could potentially make plants more resilient for astronauts as they're traveling out, improve their nutritional value, and we might even be able to engineer non-food plants to scrub CO2 from the environment so astronauts could survive better. Now, scientists on Earth have actually been tinkering with plants already, and they have improved photosynthesis and proof of concept and shown that they can increase plant production by up to 40%. Maybe we can even make the food up there taste better. Now, another thing that we have in our toolbox are stem cells. Stem cells have the possibility of becoming anything. They are pluripotent, but you don't necessarily need a fetus or a placenta. You can take adult cells, say from my skin, put them in a dish, put some factors, and revert them to that infant-like state. And if an astronaut were to bank their stem cells before going into space, they now have an insurance policy. We could take those stem cells that are genetically identical to that astronaut, put them on a chip, and create organ systems for them. So we could test things like drugs or the effects of all these different environmental changes on these little mini organoids. We could also, if the astronaut were injured or exposed to trauma in space, we could take their stem cells and use them as a bio-ink. We could potentially 3D print new organs or parts for them. We could inject them to go and repair the places that have been damaged. Now, if we were to take stem cells, not from the astronauts, but from animals with us, we might be able to produce cell-based meats, to put them into biovats and carry them with us. And this might provide a protein backbone for our astronauts. Or we can take astronauts' genetic reproductive material and put them into artificial wombs. So we can gestate embryos along the way and give rise to live births when they get to their destination. And I know that sounds kind of weird and creepy, but Israeli scientists actually have already done something kind of like that last year. Last year, they demonstrated that they could grow mice in artificial embryos. And as creepy as that sounds, it actually provides a lot of hope for people who are trying to have children, and it can extend a woman's fertility period. Now, another thing that we can do with our astronauts is put them into this like cryo sleep, in this hibernation or torpor-like state. And what that does is it decreases their metabolic rate. So we can send fewer consumables with them, and that decreases the size and weight of the spacecraft. We could also inject them with nanobots. Yes, those also exist. And we could use those to create almost like an artificial immune system for them, and also a system that could scrub their blood for toxins or go and kill cancer cells or precisely deliver drugs. Finally, we can take synthetic biology techniques and bring them with us so that when we arrive at our destination, we can use the resources and materials in situ and do things like generate rocket propellant or 3D print our habitats or generate our atmosphere. Finally, this biohacker's guide to space is our guide to living on planet Earth, because all the technologies I just told you about will increase human health, well-being, and potentially protect our own biosphere on Earth. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you, Divya. Our next speaker is an award-winning author of 5 books, and he wrote a trilogy, which many of you will have read, called Nexus. Yeah. He focuses right now on climate change, and he's an investor and advisor for many clean tech startups. And he's here to talk to you about the environment. Please welcome Ramez Nam.
All right. Well, we're going to reconfigure our mic station.
All right. Well, let's start again. I get to swear 2 more times as a result of that. So let's see when the slides start. But I'll just start anyway. I'm going to talk to you about unfucking the planet and why we can have hope, why I personally have hope in our ability to bend the curve on climate change and avert catastrophe. And I'm sure in a moment we'll get slides up here. Now, I'll go do-do-do-do-do, do-do-do-do-do, do-do-do-do-do. How many of you here care about climate change? How many of you voted today? People ask me what's the biggest thing you can do about climate change. Buy an electric car, put solar on your roof. The number one thing you can do is vote and win elections. Elections have consequences. And and this will not be our last election. There will be many, many more. Okay. How many of you own your home? How many of you have solar on your roof? A few. All right, here we go. Now we're getting started. Hi, I'm Ramez Nam, or you can call me Mez, as my friends do. And again, we're going to talk about unfucking the planet and why, third time, it's possible to have hope against climate change. Now I'm going to start with the bad news, which is that climate change is real and the planet is warming up. And we used to have a consensus that the safe limit of warming was about 2 degrees Celsius. Now we've moved that down to about 1.5 degrees Celsius. We've already warmed the planet about 1.3 degrees Celsius. We have very likely just missed 1.5 degrees Celsius. That's the bad news. We see the impact now. We used to think climate change was something that was going to happen in the future. And now we see the impacts of it right now with fires, droughts, coral bleaching, freshwater issues, flooding, and so on. Now, when I started in this field, when I switched from software to climate and energy about 12 years ago, what we believed was that by the end of this century, we might see as much as 6 degrees Celsius warming, 12 degrees Fahrenheit. That's more warming than has happened since the last ice age. And that would be a true catastrophe. The good news is we've bent the curve in that last 12 years. We've gone from expecting 4, 5, 6 degrees Celsius to now thinking we might come in at 1.9, 2.5, somewhere in there. That's not good enough, but every tenth of a degree matters. And the reason we've made this progress, one of the big reasons, is the incredible cost decline of clean energy technology. Solar panels used to cost $500 or $100 a watt. Now they sell for 20 cents. That's a 500 times price decline in those years. And no one expected this. The leading experts in energy in 2010 thought we'd see solar prices drop by half in 5 decades. I was a crazy optimist, thought they'd drop 5 times as fast. I was wrong. They dropped twice as fast as the most optimistic people on planet Earth. And it's not just solar, it's wind power, it's batteries, and now the ability to take clean energy and make hydrogen, make liquid fuels. And as all of those technologies have come down in cost, because they are technologies, fossil fuels have not. Over the last 140 years, the cost of fossil fuels has just oscillated, just bounced around, because they are a fuel. Whereas the cost of technology for clean energy has been plunging. And that crossover that we're living through right now is what gives us hope. That has also led to radically faster deployment of clean energy than expected. These are forecasts in the colored lines from the International Energy Agency of how much solar we deploy in the future. Each colored line is a new year. The black line is what actually happened. And so that exponential growth in things like solar, in things like electric vehicles, solar and wind are 88% of the new electricity we'll deploy this year. All the growth in auto sales is electric. The peak of gasoline-powered vehicle sales happened already in 2017. All of these technologies are going forward. Now, we're not done yet. There are a huge number of unsolved problems. Agriculture, cattle, deforestation, making steel, making cement, how we get the last 20 or 30% of our electricity. Now, I could tell you about the technologies that might solve these, but actually the most important ingredient in solving these problems is you. It's not a technology. The technologies will come. They're out there. It is people power that shifts our efforts into these sectors. And we think we haven't been doing a lot on climate. We haven't been doing enough, but we've been doing a lot for decades. It started in Europe, where in the 90s and the 2000s, Germany started deploying solar, Denmark started deploying wind, Norway started subsidizing electric vehicles, and those efforts scaled these technologies and brought them down. And they happened because of citizens. Now it's spreading to every corner of the world. Even Xi Jinping, president of China, declared a couple years ago a pledge of China being carbon neutral by 2060. It's a pledge, it's not really policies yet, but that's a sign of the times. But what many of you don't know is that 7 weeks ago in the US, we passed the most significant federal climate policy ever in the history of this country, and one of the most significant globally. Overnight, we roughly tripled federal spending on deployment of climate technologies. Since the 90s, it's gone up by a factor of 15. And every one of those dollars catalyzes a huge number of private sector dollars. Now, all of that having been said, it's not just you as citizens and voters, it's all of us as customers as well. These are the logos of the RE100. These are companies that have committed to 100% of their electricity being clean by 2030. And it's basically started with tech companies, but now every consumer brand has done this because they know their customers want a clean product, and now it's cheap. But it goes beyond that. It's also employees. Amazon was a laggard in making pledges like this. But then 3 years ago, thousands of Amazon employees wrote an open letter to Bezos, and hundreds walked out. And that switched Amazon to a complete pledge of massive decarbonization and creating a $2 billion venture fund in this area. So we as employees have an incredible leverage too. We are the ones who create the future. You are the ones that create the future, and together we can unfuck the planet. Thank you very much.
I'm sorry, from now on you're just going to have to look at the mic. The labs are not working. Thank you, Mez. Our next speaker is an emoji activist. Her motto is emoji for the people, by the people. She's also a publisher, an investor, and maybe you saw her on Jimmy Kimmel or The Colbert Report. Please welcome out Jenny Lee.
Thank you. I actually want to say this is actually one of the most fun, bouncy things I've ever been on. Okay, so once upon a time, it used to be really awkward when you called a taxi and you had luggage. Because if you had to run out to get something, you're like, do I bring my bag? Do I not bring my bag? Because I don't want him to think that I'm kind of jumping my fare, but I don't want him to run off with my bags as well. But then came Uber and Lyft, and you're like, oh, okay, this is all good. I know him or her, and they know who I am. We have this, we have this tracking device, so you feel okay about leaving your bag. So that's what I did when I was on my way to the airport, and I had to pick up my charger from a friend's place where he was having tantric sex, so he just left a charger in front of his apartment door. So I ran up and I was like, okay, what could happen by leaving my bag? Well, I came down, and my Lyft driver was there, but the car was not, which is very strange. And he said, they stole my car, so you've been carjacked at gunpoint. And I was like, oh my God. So we called the police, and they show up literally within a minute. And it was really impressive because they're like, oh, this happens like once a day in DC. And I was like, okay. So luckily it's a Lyft, right? So you're tracking it. And so I opened up my phone. I was like, okay, we found it. And the thing is, it was in an alleyway not moving. So the cops were like, they probably just kind of threw it away out the window. So I was like, okay. So this is me and my Lyft driver waiting in the police car. His name is Yahaya. He's a Ghanaian immigrant with 3 kids, ages 23, 19, and 3. So I was like, oops, that little kind of thing at the end. So he used my phone to call his wife, or actually text his wife, and his wife was like, what the fuck? So the detectives came and asked us to describe the kids, and we were like, oh, we can't because they had sort of masks on them. And it's interesting. So carjackings are up across the country. In Philadelphia alone, they're going to be 5x what they were in 2019. And so it's kind of interesting because carjackings used to be kind of crimes with money, like you took BMWs and Mercedes and you stripped them for money. That is now not the case. It's mostly youth. They are basically 15, 14. There's been a 12-year-old charge. There's even an 11-year-old charge. And they are bored because they were locked up in COVID. And so there are no extracurriculars and no sports, so this becomes a form of entertainment. And it's not just teen boys, it's actually girls. In this crime, 73-year-old woman dragged to death and dismembered in her car, and 4 of the 4 kids, 3 of them were girls. So we are systematically failing our youth, and I think this is a symptom of broader societal ills. I was a little bit more lucky. Within an hour, they kind of found the car because it's a red car, and another patrol car kind of saw the car driving and then gave chase, and the kids basically knew the cops were onto them, and they abandoned the car, and so they left it in Logan Circle. So we went and kind of drove. Another cop had seen a red abandoned car in the middle of the street and sort of summoned us. And so I didn't know if my bag and my passport and my laptop were still in the car. So it was sort of like, is it there, is it not? It's sort of like Schrodinger's cat, but with a backpack. And I'm glad this crowd got that. And so they fingerprinted everything. And indeed, my bag was still there with my laptop, and my passport. They had ransacked everything. They'd taken soup and spilled it over. And I was like, after that experience, I was like, fund the police. I was basically like, this is pretty impressive on the part of the police. He has his car back. He cleaned everything. His wife was like really relieved, because that is a very strange text to get from your husband. And also, during that entire time, I just want to say, my Lyft ride was still going. So Lyft checks in. Are you okay? You've been stopped a long time. Do you need help? I was like, kinda, yeah. And then on top of that, I just left a Lyft ride going because I didn't cancel it. After we got it all back, it was still running on my phone. So I was kind of curious. I wasn't charged. So 5 weeks later, after that, I fractured 12 of 24 of my vertebrae snowboarding. And I was helicoptered from Sun Valley to Boise. I left about 40% of my face actually on the mountain. So obviously everything's a little bit better. It makes me sound like a much more exciting snowboarder than I am, because I'm a girl who does extreme sports in very not extreme ways. Like if I'm bouldering, I'm like the V0, V1. But I now have titanium in my bones, like Wolverine, but a little bit more dumpling shaped. So you can witness my transformation into a bionic dumpling, and I am, God willing, hoping that 2023 is a much more chill year for me. Okay.
The hits the hits kept coming on that one. Wow, thank you so much, Jenny 8. Okay, we have 2 more talks before intermission. Our next speaker started an organization called Effective Government California, and he believes that our government institutions, we have a responsibility to improve them and to be a part of them. Please welcome Misha Chellam.
All right, audience participation, 2 questions. First, do you pay your taxes? Yeah, woo, wow. Second, did you vote in the midterms? Okay, all right. I have come here to enlist you in a generational project, and it is more than voting and paying taxes. And I'm going to make this point by kind of stressing 3 main ideas. Okay, idea number 1. Societies change through new technologies, new ideas, and there are these big shifts. And through these shifts, there are winners and losers. And an example, in the agrarian era, people used to live on farms, then we transitioned to the industrial era. Obviously, people won, like industrialists made a lot of money, and eventually the Industrial Revolution brought benefits to a lot of people. But for this transition period, there was a lot of trouble in society. And so people moved to cities. We didn't have public sanitation. We didn't have, we had graft and corruption in cities. We didn't have strong public health. And so it took the progressive era and 20 or 30 years of work by a lot of regular people to make society work again. We've now transitioned from an industrial economy to a knowledge economy. And this also has created winners, but also breakages. So for example, in the old era, you built a factory wherever there was transport and high school graduates. In the new era, you need to locate with other knowledge workers, and so we get these superstar cities that agglomerate people to them. But if we don't change zoning, then we end up with what we have in San Francisco, which is in one of the richest cities in the richest countries in the history of the world. You have horrible problems with homelessness. So that's idea number 1, is that we go through these transitions and that there's winners and losers. Idea number 2. There's this quote by E.O. Wilson. We have the problem with humanity is we have Paleolithic emotions, medieval institutions, I'd call them industrial institutions, and godlike technology. The emotions are hard-coded from 100,000 or hundreds of thousands of years of evolution. And as Kevin Kelly says, technology has its own motive force, so we're not going to stop these paradigm shifts. So what we have left is institutions. But institutions are stubborn. So the reason that we don't have school in the summer, is because we didn't used to have air conditioning. We've had air conditioning for 7 decades, but we still don't have school in the summer. And so our institutions are really slow to change. And the reason why our institutions are now so distrusted by Americans is because they address a previous period. And so they don't speak to today's problems. And institutions can be a lot of things. It can be education, it can be policing, it can be housing policy. But the institutions are democratic and are political parties. And so these are also stuck in an old big versus small government fight. In the progressive era, it took a couple of decades of people working. It was actually a nonpartisan movement. It infected or sort of infiltrated both political parties and started a third party. And at the height, 40% of all Americans were engaged in this institution building. So it was a really mass movement. Okay, idea number 3. So in these technological changes, there are winners and losers. The losers will only lose for so long before they, don't stand for it anymore. And this is a 5,000-year summary of history. Internal division within a country or external threat. Eventually, society is made equal again, but it can either be proactive or reactive. So this is the part where I make the appeal to you to enlist you in this project. In the progressive era, a lot of the funders and leaders in the progressive movement were actually industrialists who had won to some degree in that transition. Most of us here are winners of the knowledge economy. Like, we have won in this transition. And it's in our both maybe moral interest, but certainly our enlightened self-interest to get engaged in doing this work. And paying taxes does not fix this problem, and voting does not fix this problem, per se. In summary, we've had these changes in society. Institutions are really important, are the way to make society work again. If we don't fix them, we're screwed. And this is what I work on. It's called the Abundance Movement, and you can learn more about it at these links. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Misha. Our final speaker for this set, and just so you know, we'll hang out for like 20 minutes and then we'll resume again with a small nature documentary and a amuse-bouche of an Ignite talk. But before that, we're gonna have a pretty real talk. This is a Ukrainian-American artist. You may know her work from when she did Paint the Void, and yep. Well, she's back again with another kick-ass art project. Please welcome out Inga Bard.
Hi, everybody. Today, I would like to tell you about Vyshyvanki, the spiritual armor of Ukraine. Now, these are garments that are created with ethnic embroidery, and they have a rich history in Ukrainian culture. Its roots trace all the way back to ancient pagan traditions. Let's try to say the word together. Vishy, Vanka, Vishy, Vanka, and together, Vyshyvanka. You got it. That's really good, actually. So Vyshit means to embroider, but the root of the word Vishy means heavenly or divine, and it implies that this is a divine object, and it has been used as a talisman against all evil. The origin goes all the way back, just like Ukrainian culture. The very first sighting of a Vyshyvanka was on this figurine here, and it dates back to the 6th century. You could see that both of these guys are wearing a very similar pattern on their collar. In Ukraine right now, you still can see a lot of very traditional Vyshyvankas being worn. And at the same time, contemporary fashion designers have reimagined the motifs in a variety of ways. And they have sparked a lot of fashion headlines, like this one in Vogue. Embroidery is most often created by women in the winter months, between sowing the fields in the spring and collecting the harvest in the fall. It is a meditative activity that is meant to fill the cold winter months with imagination and whimsy. And the shapes, they do mean very different things. The squares, for example, signify the harvest or the earth. You see a lot of squares in Ukraine. This is because Ukrainian soil is very rich, and Ukraine has been feeding its neighbors for a very long time. There are a lot of different ethnic traditions that live side by side in Ukraine. And so the symbolism varies from village to village, and sometimes. In the Borshiv region, it is very famous for its use of black wool. The legend goes that a couple of centuries ago, the Turkish Tartars, they were conquering part of the land, and they attacked these villages and killed most of the men. The women vowed to forever use black silk, black wool, to mourn their loved ones. At the end of the day, each woman uses her own symbolic language, and she uses color, line, and shape to create unique objects coded for good fortune and good health for herself and her loved ones. With everything that's happened in Ukraine this year, I've been looking to Vyshyvanki for inspiration. I had a few ones in my studio from the past, and I started stretching them on canvas, on stretcher bars like I usually do with canvas. And I thought that I would paint on them, but I was struck by how beautiful they look just by themselves. You could just feel the meditative spells of protection hand-stitched into the fabric. A spell cast upon the world to cast good fortune and good health. In Ukraine, the Vyshyvanka has been protecting the people for a very long time, and it's called the spiritual armor for good reason. The soldiers would wear it into battle, travelers would wear it on their voyages, and people would even be buried in them. But at the same time, armor has a very real meaning in Ukraine these days. I have a pen pal whose unit I've supported in a variety of ways, and most recently I sent him a bulletproof vest. And then about a week later, he wrote me a letter thanking me, saying that he had lent it to a friend of his who got caught in a missile strike, but survived because of the vest. And so when this happened, I realized that I wanted to put these two ideas together, and now I'm selling Vyshyvankas in order to raise funds to buy more protective gear and medical supplies to send to Ukraine. Because it turned out that most of the military aid that is being sent there is used for weapons. And about half of the protective gear that ends up in Ukraine is there through donations. Each one costs about $900. I'm really looking forward to the day that Ukrainians can put down their bulletproof vests and put on their Vyshyvankas. Until that day, I invite you to hang a Vyshyvanka on your wall and help to save a life. I'm launching an Indiegogo campaign, and you can find some Vyshyvankas at the merch table at intermission. And this is our website. Thank you.
All right, we're going to take like a 20-minute break. We encourage you to meet someone and talk about what you will speak about at the next Ignite.
She was trucking on
Avocado toast. Avocado toast. Avocado toast. Where do you eat avocado toast? You eat it sitting down. Take a seat. We're about to get started. All right, and coming up, we've got fencing flatworms, we've got goat ball, we've got your immune system. I don't know what else we've got. A 10,000-year clock. We've got everything. All right.
A little bit different. Don't try this at home. We're going to keep you on the edge of your seat tonight. We're going to do a 1-minute Ignite talk. Yes, I know, crazy. And it is called the fencing flatworms.
And happy Election Day, everybody.
Experienced speakers only, that's it. Okay. Our next speaker has spent the last 50 years traveling all over Asia, helping start Wired Magazine, and recently releasing a 9,000 picture book all about Asia. Please welcome out Kevin Kelly.
I took this photograph in northern Afghanistan in the 1970s. It's an image of a game called Buzkaji, and it was produced by a medieval society that I had the privilege of being immersed in for a year or so. And all the townspeople come out to play on their own horses. It's a game that uses a ball, and you have to move the ball from one area to the other area and back. But the ball is actually a dead goat carcass, or called goat ball. And so it often is filled with sand to increase its weight, and actually being able to move that around and pick it up off of it on a galloping horse is a feat of strength. It's unbelievably superpower. And the goal is to take the ball around a pole and bring it back to and drop it into the circle of justice. And everyone else on the field is trying to prevent you from doing it and doing it themselves. So it's a free-for-all. It is incredibly heavy and really, really hard to lean over and pick this thing up and drag it around while everyone else is trying to stop you from doing it. And you can see the little whip in the guy's mouth because he's carrying this whip to release his hands. If he's able to do it, he wins some money. Not very much, but enough to get the privilege of wearing a round hat called a chapazo, and that's what the champions are called, and there's a lot of status in this society for being able to do that. It's really a scrum of horses, and the horses, of course, don't really want to go in, so often they work with partners who are riding a horse who is whipping the horse behind you to get you, their partner, into the center of this scrum of horses. And it's a very, very brutal and tough situation because sometimes the person whipping accidentally on purposes whips you instead of the horse. Who's to say? So it's an incredible thing where a lot of people are getting injured all the time and they die and they break bones. And so it's a sport that is mostly, actually is all male. And it's the people who are doing it are mostly not professionals. They're amateurs, and this is what they do on Friday afternoons, which is our Sunday. So they get wrapped up. Here's a guy with his friends helping him prepare with the armor that they need, wrapping the middle with different kinds of leathers, and then they would actually wear these boots that are very knee-high, made of leather, and he'll wrap his foot with that and even put a little stick wood inside, and the high-heel boots lock his feet into the stirrup so he doesn't fall off. And you can see the whip has a mouth tab in it that enables them to carry it in the mouth with using their hands. And the guy's whole robe is shattered, his glove is shattered, his face is shattered, he has a broken nose. That's the level of brutality in these medieval games. Here they are in Mongolia, where they play a similar kind of game. They're on horses that are a little smaller, more like our size of a pony. But it's the same kind of rules, and the same thing throughout all the stands, Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, where they're trying to, again, move this dead calf or goat ball and move it from one end to the other. And it's a game where some people are really good at, but everybody comes out to play. And so the entire town, all the men, will come out on their horses. They're normally ranchers or farmers, and even if they don't win, they get to say that they played in the Buzkaji game, and they have a certain amount of status for that. And for the people who are not playing, they come out and they watch. So the entire come out, they'll sit on the hillside and watch the games, and that tent over on the right is where the dignitaries and the sponsors and the referee are sitting watching the game. And there will be adjacent snacks being served afterwards in the afternoon. They'll set up a little festival, and the tea merchant will come out, and he'll set up some samovars to start to brew the tea, and they'll serve it on some beds that have carpets over it, and they'll spend the afternoon, Friday afternoon after the prayers, sitting and watching the game. And they're also set up a carousel merry-go-round for the boys who are supposed hopefuls someday that they'll be able to play in the Buzkaji game themselves. And I tell all this because this is a medieval society, and this young boy who was only 12-year-old then is probably in his 60s right now, and he has seen more change in his life than any of us will ever see, and we really should have compassion and empathy for those in the world who have seen such an incredible change of moving from the medieval times to today. So thank you.
I think he is the world's most interesting man. Our next speaker is a tech entrepreneur, New York Times bestselling author, and he invests in companies that make the world more resilient. Please welcome out Rob Reed.
Today, no informed scientist claims to know if a lab leak caused COVID. Putting the odds at 0 or 100% is propaganda because too much early information was suppressed to allow certainty. What we do know is that COVID's costing us something like 20 million lives and $20 trillion. So anything adding to the significant odds that it was a lab leak should forever be avoided with horror, such as the practices of a notorious US government program called PREDICT. PREDICT funded teams to go into places like remote bat caves to find novel coronaviruses and bring them back to labs with awful safety records in Wuhan. This program may well have contributed to tens of millions of deaths, which really shouldn't qualify it to have an even bigger and riskier follow-on program. But it does, and I know this factually because I write science fiction. Pause for laughter. I first researched the dangers of unnatural pandemics for a novel, which led me to give a somewhat panicked TED Talk in 2019. A few months later, COVID sent me down a 1,000-hour rabbit hole of research, which I eventually presented to the top biosecurity people at the National Security Council and other places. Through this, I learned about this new program called Deep Vision, which is spelled like that, and literally nobody knows why. Predict found 1,200 novel viruses over 8 years. Deep Vision plans to find 10,000 over 5 years. Then, like Predict, they're going to take these disease vectors and store them in labs of varying quality, but this time in American cities and suburbs. Then, unlike Predict, they plan to figure out exactly which of those viruses could cause terrible pandemics. These viruses won't just be weapons of mass destruction, they'll be the worst ones ever, because no nuclear bomb can kill like COVID, and COVID's mild compared to the viruses this program could find, making their genetic recipes doomsday codes. And Deep Vision could find several of them, whereupon they plan to publish those genomes to the entire world. Tens of thousands of people across dozens of countries could then easily make these viruses from scratch, and some of them have scary bosses. Now, no sci-fi writer would ever come up with a story this stupid and impossible to believe, but it's true. And most of it's laid out in an interview I conducted with MIT evolutionary engineer Kevin Esfeld, which both Sam Harris and I published to our podcast listeners back in February as part of an ad hoc effort by several of us to stop this crazy train. Now, I think we will succeed, but it's insane that we have to. So how the hell did we get here? Well, the people who build careers poking at insanely dangerous viruses are an insular group. They can be very, very resistant to outside oversight or even opinions, almost as if outsiders aren't informed enough to be entitled to opinions. As a small, insular community, they were long left to their own devices, with insiders awarding grants to other insiders, or peer reviewing each other's papers, or approving each other's safety practices. This is a common phenomenon. It's called regulatory capture, and it caused the financial crisis, as well as countless smaller disasters that didn't make the papers. When regulatory capture harms auto safety or global prosperity, it's obscenely wrong enough. So do we really want to let small cliques gamble with hundreds of millions of lives as a means of advancing their field? Do we want echo chambers in charge of doomsday safety? Well, every top expert says it's safe. I know because they all told me we were on vacation together. Open sourcing doomsday viruses only makes sense if you think you're so much smarter than the bad guys, it doesn't matter what they know. But we're ethical, which makes us harmless, and they're stupid outsiders, which makes them harmless. That is schizophrenic arrogance in an individual. But group minds go crazy all the time when everyone who's entitled to an opinion starts repeating each other. And biology is not the only danger zone. So is AI and nanotechnology, some crazy shit that only we science fiction writers know about. So back during the Cold War, just 2 people had the power to cancel the future, and trillions were spent on weapons, surveillance, and ghastly regional wars to deter the use of that power. Strange as it sounds, flirting with the apocalypse was a public good back then. It was practiced by huge governments with excellent, brilliant teams that were very cautious, examining every angle. And it was all done for the public goal of avoiding future world wars. But we're entering an era of privatizing the apocalypse. And if we outsource doomsday decisions to anybody with advanced training in the wrong fields, we won't have trillion-dollar deterrence budgets for all of them. So let's not. That was uplifting, right? Yeah.
Excuse me, can I have a vodka? Thank you, Rob. Next up is a woman who lives at the intersection of human potential and technology, and she does a lot of work in the transformation space. Please welcome Nicole Bradford.
Hi, I'm Nicole, and if you really knew me, you would know that I spent most of my life feeling very, very lonely. And I had sort of a low-grade loneliness that was a lot like a low-grade fever, always burning in the background. It was my constant companion. And this image represents how I felt, a girl in a snow globe with the glass wall between her and the world. And you might say that it was because I was the only black kid in my school, or because I was a nerd and a geek, but I would say it was because at a very young age, I somehow decided that I would have to take care of myself, and proceeded to do that for decades. And I always thought that no one would help me and I would always be alone, until I changed my life at a meditation retreat, where in a moment I felt the web of life. And I knew with that just one taste that I wasn't alone and that I would be connected. And so I changed my life, and I gave up my big time job, my executive on the rise position, and I moved to San Francisco, where there's a lot of weirdos interested in consciousness and tech. And I studied that connection, and I studied it practically, and I studied it spiritually and with tech. And while I cannot yet prove to you that we are all connected, I can show you that you are more connected than you imagine. For example, when we are together and we feel connected, our heart rates, our respiration syncs, and even our gamma brain waves begin to sync amazingly. And so why syncing is important is because it informs pro-social behavior and helps with in-group, out-group bias. And as you can imagine, it's November 8th. So many of our problems are based on who we think is in and who we think is out. Even our microfacial expressions and our micro movements sync. Kazuyano, who is a Hitachi fellow, he's seen this across 10 million data points, and he calls it dancing. We dance and we sync, and we have even seen it now at a distance through a video game. Two people, no audio, no video, just with a shared task, and their brain waves sync. Our world is digitizing. This represents very interesting possibilities. In addition, sensory perception. We don't see all the light, and we don't hear all the sound that the animals of the world see. The theory is that evolution favors fitness. Imagine if we saw each other in that way. An embodied connection or embodied cognition. You have neurons in your gut and in your skin. Your brain might be in your skull, but your intelligence, it's throughout your body. It's in your community, it's in your family, it's in your space. And so I think that this represents the next great tech frontier, using our creativity and our technology to truly understand ourselves, our embodied cognition. I think that we're too distracted by AI. I think we've become so focused on artificial intelligence that we've ignored our own biointelligence. And I think that certainly we'll put chips in our brains, but we have this vast resource untapped. And I think when you combine synchrony and perception and embodied cognition, we can see a deep connectedness, far deeper than we can imagine. And with that, I actually believe that sensory clusters are possible, deep, empathetically connected groups of people, and maybe it's everyone here in this room is a great place to start. And so what I believe is that if we can use technology to help people feel their deep connectedness, then maybe, just maybe, if they can practically feel the web of life, then they can spiritually embrace it and come to know this truth that we have always been together, and you have never been alone.
Oh my gosh, I needed to just take a second. That was amazing. Thank you so much, Nicole. Our next speaker is an interplanetary artist who has been featured all over the world, including the New York Hall of Science and the Venice Biennale. Please welcome Scott Kildall.
An exoplanet, simply put, is a planet outside of our solar system. This illustration, not by me, is of 55 Cancri E. It's a super Earth with a hot molten crust. This exoplanet is called Kepler 16b and has 2 suns, like Luke's home planet of Tatooine from Star Wars. It's a cold gas giant, but the sunsets are beautiful. This exoplanet here is a rendition of TRAPPIST-1F, which is only 39 light years away, and is tidally locked, meaning that it gets really hot on one side from the sun and gets icy and cold on the other side. And you've probably seen headlines such as this, which talk about new discoveries of exoplanets. And in this rendition here, you see something that is very specific, an Earth-like planet with 2 moons. And what happens here is that they're using these exoplanets to give us a sense of hope and excitement. This is called the Exoplanet Travel Bureau, produced by NASA, and features humans on exoplanets themselves. It's meant to excite us and give us a sense of like what could be possible. And I think what we're missing here is a sense of childlike imagination, where we kind of go ooh and ah and wonder about what's out there in space. But the question I'm kind of thinking about these days is, what do scientists really see? So this image here is one that is taken from the James Webb Space Telescope, and it looks, kind of like a blue smudge. And it's of an exoplanet that's 385 light years away, a super Jupiter, about 9 times the mass of Earth. Scientists are super excited by these smudges, but to us, it looks kind of like a picture someone took on an iPhone while they're drunk of a car headlight. And it's just not that exciting. And this is where artists come in. But consider this as well, that most exoplanets are found through indirect observation techniques, such as the transit method. And what happens here is that the planet that you see going around the sun, scientists are not actually observing that, but instead they're observing the data of light fluctuations as that exoplanet goes around that sun. Scientists have found about 5,000 exoplanets plus in the last 3 decades. That's a huge number, right? The first one was in 1995. Most of them have been discovered in the last 10 years. And so what we have here are things like this graph here on the left. And how do we get from that to this beautiful image on the right? And that's where artists like myself come in. So the way it works with the art-science collaboration is that I work with the SETI Institute as an artist, and I get data from them, and I then go ahead and make visualizations based on the data that they give me. I do the best I can. And this is a VR experience of an exoplanet map. So the threshold for inclusion is interesting because it doesn't have to be, as long as the image doesn't contradict the data, then you're all good. So this planet here, once again, not by me, is not actually red, does not actually have the rings, does not actually have the moons. And so the question is, how do you get from the smudge, and what do you do with this smudge when the data doesn't really line up? And so what I think we need to do is just embrace the excitement behind this. A side story. In 1877, Giovanni Schiaparelli, an Italian astronomer, observed the surface of Mars and noticed all these like fissures and lines and produced this erroneous map of the Martian landscape. And it was due to faults in the telescope of resolution. This was later picked up by Percival Lowell, an American businessman who theorized that these are Martian canals and they belong to some sort of Martian civilization. Completely erroneous and crazy, and got people super excited, including H.G. Wells, who made The War of the Worlds, wrote that novel about Martian civilizations coming in and conquering the world and getting really, causing a lot of problems. And this is where science folds back on itself. As a teenager, Robert Goddard, the scientist, was inspired by H.G. Wells' work and made the first liquid fuel rocket. And this is where scientists, I think, need artists, because we're the ones who make their discoveries come to life. And we need scientists a little bit, because we're the storytellers, but we also have the creative energy that make these discoveries happen. And we're working towards the same thing, which is to look at exoplanets and look at the possibility for discovery and curiosity. And it's more like Star Trek. curiosity and exploration, rather than conquest, colonization, and profit.
My 10-year-old self is giddy. I used to have this book when I was a kid with the planets, and the last one was Pluto, and I just remember looking at this image of Pluto with all the gases, and it was blue and desolate. I know Pluto's not a planet anymore, but anyways. Yes, I think it is. Anyhow, okay, our next speaker has made long-term thinking his life's work. And by long-term thinking, I mean tens of thousands of years into the future and also into the past. He is the executive director of The Long Now, and he has been working on a number of fascinating projects, and he's going to share one of them with us tonight. Please welcome Alexander Rose.
Thank you. So yeah, over the last 25 years, I've been working with a group called the Long Now Foundation that includes people like Stuart Brand and computer scientist Danny Hillis, and one of our speakers tonight, Kevin Kelly. And I've been working on this idea of building an object that can get people to think in much longer time spans and make them feel responsible for not only the last 10,000 years, but maybe the next 10,000 years. And over the last 25 years, I've been visiting sites around the world that include the Svalbard Global Seed Vault, the various nuclear waste repositories like Yucca Mountain, the one in Onkalo, a 100,000-year nuclear waste repository, the Mormon genealogical vaults. So all of these sites trying to learn a little bit about the ways that things have been designed, and also monuments where things have lasted over these timescales. And most recently, I went on this amazing trip to Japan to visit some of the oldest companies and institutions in the world. And one of them was this hotel, one of the oldest businesses in the world, started in 781 AD. And we had this amazing opportunity to interview the 84-year-old man who's been managing it for the last several decades. And he told stories not only about how they handled the last pandemic that we just went through, the one 100 years ago, the one 500 years ago, the wars, the fires, all of these things. And it reminded me of kind of why we started the Long Now Foundation and why we had this kind of where we are in the civilizational conversation of, if we look at the last 10,000 years where agriculture started and then cities, and we think about that, well, are we at the end of a 10,000-year story, or are we at least in the middle of a 20,000-year story? And if we think about ourselves in the middle of that story, how would we act differently? And this brings us back to this icon around long-term thinking that I've been working on with Danny Hillis, the 10,000-year clock, and I'll just dive into one of the design problems that we worked on. So it's represented by this shape that you see in the sky if you take a picture of the sun through the course of the year at high noon. And the clock that we're designing can synchronize itself to the sun with thermal energy at high noon. The problem is this shape shows that during the course of that year, you get this plus or minus 15-minute difference. So if you're trying to coordinate absolute time to solar time, it's off. That's easy to make a correction for in a one-year clock. But if you're making a 10,000-year clock, you also have to account for the 26,000-year precession of the Earth's axis. You also have to account for the fact that the Earth is slowing its rotational rate by a second a century, in some cases a little bit more or less based on climate change, where the polar ice goes to one place. But all of that has to come together in this single object that can account for solar time to absolute time for 10,000 years. So that's one of the kind of mechanical problems that we solve in the clock. But the real thing is we're trying to make something that's monument scale that people can visit and they can really kind of change the way they think about it. It's mythic. People will tell stories about it. So for the last 15 years, we've been excavating a site in West Texas using some old technologies, some new technologies like a diamond chainsaw that uses robotics to cut stairs through the solid rock for 2 years over hundreds of feet, using materials like high-grade stainless steel, silicon bronze. These are the bells for the clock that we worked, one of our board members, Brian Eno, and Danny Hillis built an algorithm that can ring those bells in a different sequence each day for 10,000 years. Now the real question becomes, how do you take a monument like this, and how does that change society? And this is where, really kind of the rubber meets the road of, an experience that you go to, you come back from, and it really changes you. And this experience that I had going to this hotel in Japan really changed me, where in talking to the person who was running it, he was the 46th generation owner. And for the very first time, he was handing it off to his daughter that you see here on the left, or his granddaughter, as the 47th generation, the first woman to ever run this business. And he said, it's time for a change. And that was the part where I was realizing that it is time for a change in the way that we attack problems that need to be attacked over very long times, like climate, hunger, education, whatever it is. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Xander. All right, we've got 2 more speakers. Elle, get ready. You're coming down here in a minute. If you've heard of Wired Magazine, Cho Chocolate, Neolife, then you've benefited from our next speaker's genius. And she's about to share her latest passion. Please welcome out Jane Metcalf.
Hi there. So, can we sequence your entire immunome? It's not just a crazy moonshot idea. It's exactly what we need to be doing right now. My name is Jane Metcalf, and I am the chairman of the Human Immunome Project. 30 years ago, I started Wired Magazine with Kevin Kelly, so it's fun to share a stage with him. And then after that, I helped start and run the Cho Chocolate Factory down on Pier 15 in San Francisco. And surely my slides will show at some point. Oh, we're done. You're punishing me for being late with my slides. I expected this. I thought about this. I've been dreaming about this for 3 nights. I knew this would happen. I get it. I totally deserve every minute of it. Right? Exactly. The question is, am I going to start again, or am I just going to keep talking? Okay, all right. Can we model your entire immunome? It's not just a crazy moonshot idea. It's exactly what we need to be doing right now. My name is Jane Metcalf, and I am the chair of a new organization called the Human Immunome Project. 30 years ago, we started Wired Magazine with Kevin Kelly, so it's great to be on stage with him. And then I opened and ran the Cho Chocolate Factory with friends on Pier 17. And then 5 years ago, I started Neolife to track the next phase of the digital revolution, when we take our digital tools and engineering mindset to hack our own biology. And you have been thinking about biology a lot over the past 2.5 years. Epidemiology, virology, vaccinology, but there's so much we still don't know. Who's going to get sick? We don't know how your immune system is going to respond. We can't anticipate how you respond to these types of threats or to the drugs that we may give you to solve those problems. And the reason why is because your immune system is completely unique. And we cannot anticipate how you will respond to the treatment because it's a complex system. It's made up not just of your organs, your cells, your tissues, and your molecules. It's constantly changing. So 20 years ago, we sequenced the human genome. We can now do that in a matter of hours at a cost of $200. Your genome is a fixed set of nucleotides that you were born with. Your immune system, on the other hand, is constantly changing, and it's a complex system. So we can't think about it just in terms of mapping. We have to think about it in terms of a 3D model. It is your cells, tissues, molecules, and organs, but it is also your whole omics stack. It's your genome, your transcriptome, your proteome, your metabolome, your microbiome, your epigenome, and all of that's just inside your body. There's also everything outside, which is your exposome. It's the stuff you eat. It's the pollution in your neighborhood. It's the stress you experience. So how are we going to do this? We need lots and lots of data. We need it across populations, across time, around the world. We need people who think about immunology from a systems standpoint, and we need some really kick-ass machine learning. The good news is machine learning is exponentially growing right now. DeepMind can figure out the protein structures of 200 million proteins. We want them to work now on mechanistic models that'll help us understand the underlying science. And even when we can't do that, we can look for phenomenological models that'll help us see patterns and information. But we want your data from individuals from all over the planet. It has to be extremely diverse data. But we need to be able to provide security and protection for that data. We need to make sure we got it under informed consent. We need to make sure that it is a machine-readable format that's consistent across devices. And we need to make sure that incentives exist for researchers like this group to share their data. This happened 6 weeks ago. These people came together to create a strategy for the Human Immunome Project. Computational systems biologists, immunologists, machine learning experts from academic institutions, pharmaceutical industry representatives from the United States, from Europe, from the Middle East. Eric Schmidt was our co-chair, along with the Nobel Prize-winning immunologist Pete Doherty. We came together because we have a really big goal to advance the science. Biomedicine is uniquely positioned to take advantage of what we can do with machine learning, and it serves as a unique inspiration for that machine learning. Because we need to transform health, and not just to predict who is at risk of a disease or how to treat them. We need to transform health so that we don't get sick in the first place. So we need to build a quantitative and predictive model of the human immunome that can help us do that and help us discover drugs and get treatments to people faster. And we are about ready to spend $3.8 trillion on healthcare this year, and that number is just keep going up, while our outcomes and our health spans are going down. We need to redirect that money because we all experience, we're all susceptible to disease, but it's a sad truth that people of color, people who are poor, who are low and middle income countries carry an unfair burden of disease. A model of the human immunome can get the right treatment to the right person at the right time. So if you want to know more about this, if you have skills or resources to donate to this effort, please check out Human Immunome Project, send me an email, and if you want to know more about this stuff, at the Neobiological Frontier, I put out a weekly newsletter that you can find at neo.life, and that's .life, not .com, because that's just cooler. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane, and thanks for rolling with the punches. All right. Uh-oh.
Last speaker.
Man, did we infect the slides when we were messing with Jane's?
Uh-oh.
Oh, shit. Yeah. Yeah. All
Wait,
right.
he doesn't know that.
He doesn't know. So this next speaker we saw on stage here. He is an improv master. He's literally been touring the world doing improv, training locally, and we asked him to wrap up the show. So he's going to kind of do a summary with a prompt. And Elle's prize, if Elle is still here.
Elle? Yeah.
She gets to choose the prompt.
Elle, come up here.
Yeah, come on up. And so...
Yeah, so let's be clear that this is not like any of the Ignite talks you've seen tonight. Larry, who I'm going to invite on stage in a second, has not seen any of these slides. He hasn't been to any of the rehearsals. He doesn't know what any of the talks have been about tonight.
And unlike all the other speakers who have worked on their slides, practiced, or at least told us they did,
He obviously did.
all right. And Larry, you can come on up here too.
Larry's back here. Larry, come on out.
Oh, okay.
Woo!
So,
Larry Dorsey, Jr.
So the way this is going to work out is we are going to ask
This is your special prize.
What is a philosophical question that hasn't been answered to the crowd, and you get to pick?
Your favorite answer. So the question to all of you is, what is a philosophical question that hasn't been answered? Why are we here?
Okay.
Chocolate or vanilla? Wait, I heard one back here. Okay. What's the point? Couldn't hear that. What does a worm do that doesn't get pregnant?
I think that one just lives.
Ooh, is consciousness embodied or not?
What?
Bigs as bets. Pigs. Pigs as pets. Thank you. Pigs as pets.
What are you
Man, I can't hear
thinking?
up here.
Woman on the street, what are you thinking?
It's a toss-up between chocolate and vanilla, but we're going Brian Boitano.
All right.
Okay.
I'll do it, boo. Male figure skater.
I don't know who he is either.
Right? Male figure skater. Right? Yeah, male figure skater. All right, no,
Should we do
all right, let's
chocolate
do
and vanilla?
chocolate and vanilla. Fine, chocolate and vanilla wins. Chocolate and vanilla. Okay.
It's your show, guys. I mean, chocolate and vanilla. Like, okay.
All right.
All right. All right. You ready, Larry? So Larry is going to give an Ignite talk about his favorite thing, chocolate and vanilla.
So there's been a fight like Muhammad Ali in the Thriller in Manila, and you might have seen it in movies with Godzilla and gorillas. But actually, the real thing is not the apocalypse that we're scared of, it's whether it's vanilla or chocolate. See, right here we looking at an ostrich. And be careful with eggs when you're making an omelet because it might belong to it. See, I'm just trying to find out what is chocolate. When you make it, they said originally it is a different color. But I'm just trying to make sure that chocolate is not referring to white people or brothers. What I'm saying is we're all connected because we all know me, and we all have the brain connection because we're not lonely. See, so you might be skydiving, high-fiving, or connecting to Wi-Fi and you can look it up on the internet, and you will never find the correct answer because it's all up to your inner sense. It might be your sense or your taste buds that what you might find out what you love. And I might have to point, because what's the point? And after I eat ice cream, I smoke a joint. See, see, you can hit me up for the answer and call me, and I'll give you a long explanation like Salvador Dali as I am trying to get connected to Ex Machina and go into a dream state like Hypnagogia. See? So, from Lemony Snicket to Jiminy Cricket, that question has been answered deep in science fiction. See, we're trying to install solar panels for the polar animals, for octopuses, and people who shoot Roman candles. So, when you go in and you start feeling your stomach throbbing, and you're either at Ben & Jerry's or maybe Baskin Robbins, I'm gonna let you know how my mind goes into story mode, because I don't pick chocolate or vanilla, I pick Oreo. See, as I embark on it, talk about the chocolate, and even do this with catharsis, I'm concerned about all these goat carcasses. See, even if we go to Mars, if we go to the stars, if we're eating chocolate bars or vanilla lard or something that something that's delicious, like Snickle Fritz or something ridiculous, just know that when you have a chocolate vanilla synthesis, you could get with this. See, I'm just trying to let you know on this platform how it's out of the norm, like a goat on a horse or a camel in a sandstorm, that you could be a dumpling and transform. Yeah, yes, because I don't want to cause any confusion. When it's chocolate and vanilla, I tend to be a little, what's that word called? I don't know, but it has to do with institutions. See, I'm just trying to make sure that, like Jane said with immunologists, that in the future, inside of all different types of colleges where knowledges and accomplishments are passed around, that we could Vivivanka it, or Vishivanka it. Ooh, I'm on top of it, because we're bringing it back to vanilla and chocolate. Yes, this is multiple things happening, me trying to put it up while I'm rapping it. Yes, and it is so magic when I start doing it sporadic. But I'm going to tell you something that's never been told. In life, there's a lot of problems, and it may be a rocky road. And you may go into the Antarctic and feel snow drop like the time and wrinkle, or you may go in and ask for gummy bears and sprinkles. But no matter what you do when you go in these stores, remember, preference or whatever you choose in your identity, the choice is yours. Yes. So I've been around the world, and like flatworms, it doesn't matter if you're a boy or a girl. But remember, when it comes to chocolate and vanilla, in relationships, it's called a swirl. So, I'm going to end it like this. We'll blow you a kiss and see that this cosmic world is something that we've never really uncovered or discovered, but make sure that an ostrich is not your lover and that it's not like Terminator or Predator with Danny Glover. But I'm going to say this. The way to get world peace, like my beautiful sister said, is understanding that we're all connected more than just our head. And I don't know where to end and I don't know where to start, but I'm going to make sure that I connect with all of you from the bottom of my heart. Chocolate and vanilla.
Thank you, sir. That was really awesome.
That was hard.
All right, thank you very much. Here you wrap up. All right, we put out surveys. Please just let us know what you think. And yeah, come to the next one. See you later. Nominate a speaker.